Welcome to the Lead Gen Leaders Podcast, connecting you to the leading minds in home improvement to discuss all things marketing and leadership. And now, your host, Kyle Powers.
Welcome to the Lead Gen Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Powers. I'm extremely excited for today's guest as he has a wealth of knowledge spanning over a decade in the home remodeling business, helping contractors generate leads through online platforms. He is currently the Senior Manager of National Accounts for Modernize Home Services. I'd like to welcome to the show Peter Crum. Hello, Peter.
Hey, hello, Kyle. How are you?
I'm doing very fantastic. And you today?
I am doing great. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show today to really talk about a big topic that a lot of my clients talk to me about, and it's, where can we get more leads? And that leads down the road to, hey, who online can generate us leads? And then not only who can generate us the leads, but once we get these leads, how do we convert them? And so really excited to have you on, representing QuinStreet. And we'll talk about a merger that's happened with and turned into Modernize Home Services. But before we really get into online lead gen and purchasing leads, Peter, why don't you give the listeners a little bit of background, who you are and kind of how you've arrived at this spot with Modernize Home Services?
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Kyle. I'm Peter Crum. I've been with QuinStreet now, Modernize Home Services, for about 12 and a half years. Kind of interestingly, though, I got my initial start in the online lead generation space within home services back in 1999. With a short hiatus there, came back to QuinStreet in 2008. So the last 12 plus years I've been with QuinStreet, and again, now Modernize Home Services. A lot of growth and a lot of excitement in this industry. And, it keeps me excited every single day that I come to work.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure you've seen a lot of changes through the years at how online lead gen works and the client base and everything like that. So I'm excited to get in here and talk to you about that. We're starting to talk about handling online paid leads. If we were reaching out to maybe a company that maybe is a little smaller, has maybe never bought online leads before, or maybe hasn't kind of dabbled in it and didn't do so well, what are kind of some maybe best methods for starting to generate those leads and get up to handle a program that you can help facilitate?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think I couldn't start without saying, use a company like Modernize Home Services. That's a great way to acquire quality leads and at scale for your business. But there's a lot of other opportunities and options out there, which we use to generate leads as well. So as an individual company, you're able to run your paid search engine marketing campaigns, most popular, of course, being Google. Email campaigns have a lot of impact. You may want to run some social media campaigns, whether that's through Facebook or Instagram. And even further, you may, within your websites or across the online world, run some display ads. So best thing I'd say is use multiple channels and use numerous campaigns. You have to really test them all out and see what's going to perform the best for you and for your company as well.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly on a multi-channel approach. If I had the magic wand, I and could answer the question of, hey, what's the best lead source out there? I think at times certain lead sources get hot, but I think it's a roller coaster. Also, I think what necessarily is working today may not work till tomorrow, and you have to have the different sources that can take the lead spot, so to say, in your company for a time being, and you get your use out of that, and you kind of pull back as it dies down, and then you go back into it as it picks back up. So not relying on just one thing, I think is great advice there. And then going past that, so they find these campaigns, they get them set up. A big thing is really been able to manage and track that. And so you talk about, using a CRM and the data behind that. What do you have to say about that, Peter?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really crucial. We found the companies that use the CRM have the ability to quickly track and manage and run reports, which is extremely important. Having that data, the more data, the better. As companies like Modernize Home Services have the capabilities to integrate with your CRM, so we can ship that lead, the lead details directly into your system. And that would also help allow you to get to those leads quicker. Another thing I would say is making sure that the companies that you have the right team calling on these leads. It's really important that you have a strong team that's able to get to those leads quickly, and that they're able to speak intelligently to these consumers as they're just exploring a very major home improvement project that they're looking to pursue. I've learned over the time that I've been here that, leads can technically be won within the first 30 seconds to a minute on that call. So handling those leads quickly and very professionally will go a long way for you.
And you actually touched on a few points there, talking about having the right people call the leads and how they can be won, but also calling them quickly with having integration into the CRM. And so I want to break down a couple of these points and talk about them specifically, because I think they're some of the most important when it comes to buying online leads from a service such as Modernize Home Services. And so having the right team calling the leads. So a lot of the different listeners on the podcast, there's, companies that, have call centers of 10, 15, 20 people. And they certainly have it dialed in, how to, comes right in their CRM. They're calling these people. How quickly do you recommend that if you're going to buy leads from you guys, that the company's able to turn around and reach back out to this lead?
Yeah, we kind of live and breathe a little saying, speed to the lead. So it is extremely important to get to that lead and make that initial call. I'd say within the first minute, maybe within the first minute or two. Letting that lead sit for more than 5 or 10 minutes, you really start losing some of the contact rate, and getting to that lead as quickly as possible seems to be the winning strategy.
And so as a listener to this show, if you're looking at possibly exploring buying leads online, you're going to have the systems and processes in place to be able to reach them quickly, in a minute or two, as Peter just stated. So that's great. I almost think that if you can't get to them within the first couple of minutes, you really got to figure out your systems and processes to be able to do that. In fact, I was just working with a client recently, and everything with the COVID client right now. When you get sick people, they got to get tested. That means they're out for a couple of days, and so they were a little short-staffed in the call center. And the new manager had brought up to me, hey, how do you recommend I kind of reschedule things today, to make sure things don't get missed? And I said, well, the most important thing is we want to make sure that any leads we're paying for to come in, so things like TV, other online stuff, as well as, purchase leads, such as you provide, that we can get to them in that quick time that we need to. So that should be the absolute first focus, when we're short-staffed. So that's a really good point right there. And then, so having the right people calling the leads, having the right script, even I feel even if you're the owner of the company and you're just a one-man operation, you have to be able to get to them quickly, and you should have some type of, bullet points or scripting laid out for yourself so you handle these correctly. What are your thoughts on that, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, that's spot on. And you had mentioned earlier, a lot of these listeners may have a larger operation or a call center with multiple seats. And whether you have, more than 10 call reps, or you have just a small call room of 1 to 3 reps calling on those leads, I would say you're spot on. Having the right script is extremely important. And just really, making sure that that the people calling are, compassionate to the consumer as well, and really making sure that they're putting their best foot forward when reaching out, and doing so in a quick manner.
Awesome. So we're basically at the point where you have, the listeners decided, hey, we want to get some leads, or we've been getting these leads, but we want to do it better. We figured out, hey, the script we're going to use. We figured out that we need to get a hold of them very quickly when they come in. What are some next best practices that you recommend for them really to be, successful with converting those leads and getting the most out of them?
Yep, absolutely. So as much as we can say speed to the lead and call it within the first minute, as we know, they don't always answer on that first call. So having those processes in place, which could be, having at least 10 touch points over the first maybe 3 to 5 days, really important to put forth, a nice, a good effort within that first few days of receiving that lead. To make sure that you're reaching out. Now, that doesn't just mean calling and or leaving a voicemail if they don't answer. Having a few other different methods to communicate with that homeowner, also very important. So that could be placing a call, leaving a voicemail, following up with an email. In that email, you should probably have a few bullet points, a nice introduction about your company. And then, I'd say in the last couple of years, sending a text message has become very important to a lot of companies. And to one degree or another, you're likely to get a response. We all have a cell phone very close by nowadays. So a combination, calling, sending emails, sending text messages, you wrap all those things up and you have a winning combination there.
Yeah, I can agree with you more on that, and definitely on the text messaging. Getting a lot popular, like you said, in the last couple of years. I would go out to even say that if you are not utilizing text in your lead setting portion of your business to confirmations, and even companies that are starting to utilize texting when it comes to recruiting and following back on applicants that don't necessarily answer on your first call. Texting is a huge deal, and there's a lot of companies that can help you do texting better. But even just pulling out, a certain cell phone in your call center and figuring out how to, get that text across can help conversion rates go way up today. So that's a really great point there. And so you had kind of brought up something to me, kind of being the expert and being, flexible and, what the proper expectations of online leads could be in conversion rates. And can you kind of touch about what you meant about, being the expert and being flexible?
Yeah. So absolutely. When your call rep is representing your company and calling a consumer back, the consumers put in their information online. They are gearing up to potentially spend a lot of money in what would be a very major, potentially major home improvement project, in a potentially a big project that's going to perhaps disrupt their home for a few days to a few weeks. So when you're speaking to this consumer, you want to be the expert because they might not even know exactly what they're getting into. They may not know all of the different styles and all the different materials. And, say as an example with replacement windows, the different energy efficiencies. So you want to be the expert and really help that consumer feel comfortable, feel confident speaking with you, and you being able to answer any questions that they have. So you're the expert. They're learning, and you get to be able to drive that conversation to inform them properly with kind of what to expect with their upcoming home improvement project. I also kind of think about these call reps, it's kind of a certain verbal demeanor. You're speaking with them over a phone. So you definitely want to, sound confident. Again, you want to make them feel comfortable in dealing with you and your company. So you're really a well-rounded, well-spoken representative is really going to help you keep that consumer at ease. And ultimately, that's going to allow that consumer to be comfortable to schedule that appointment. At the end of the day, you're buying leads and you need to convert those into appointments.
And then also with being flexible, I know in our pre-call that you, for this podcast, you had brought up the fact that, there's companies that have really tried to, hey, if we can't schedule this in the next day or two, we're not going to schedule it at all. And you had brought up that, with buying an online lead, you might need to be a little bit more flexible with it than your normal lead sources. What are your thoughts on that, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, we all want to set that appointment anywhere from say 48 to 72 hours out. That's the most ideal time frame that the consumer is ready to come out and have your sales representative, come out and give them a demonstration. But being flexible with these online leads, this consumer may or may not be ready to have you come out. It might be 3 to 5 days. It might be 7 to 10 days. We see that those leads still convert. You can set a lead and still issue that lead successfully to have your sales rep go out to do a demo. I'd say up 7 or 10 days down the road. These consumers often are kind of initiating their research. So they're not all in a hurry. They don't necessarily need you out there within 1 or 2 days. So I'd say being flexible is also crucial. And knowing that, hey, if I schedule this lead, 7 days out, you can be confident that it's still going to issue and get your sales rep to go meet with them in person.
Yeah, and I agree with you that, 24, same day, if we can get out to see him today or tomorrow is best, but certainly within 3 days. History has shown with the statistics that, past 3 days, yes, conversions do go down. But I also agree with you on the fact that when the consumer is initiating contact, and they are, whether it's responding to your TV ad or a direct mail piece or any online stuff or buying online leads, they are initiating that. So something a little further out can still convert at a great rate, than if we're, maybe canvassing them or something like that and trying to set. So I do agree with you at being flexible is a big deal. And so expectations, Peter, what are some proper expectations that someone buying leads from you guys at Modernize that they should expect with everything?
Yeah, I think there's a consumer behavior that's associated with online leads, and so for me, in speaking with a home improvement professional or a larger home improvement company, I need to make sure that I'm setting that proper expectation of how are these leads going to convert. That expectation kind of kicks off the entire campaign. So I can go into a little bit of detail. I always usually use the example of, say, per every 100 leads that you purchase. But on average, you should see in the range, and it's always a range, you're going to see in the range of somewhere around 12 to 18%. Maybe in a really good month, 15 to 25% of your raw leads converting into a scheduled appointment. To take that a step further, we like data, so we like to track every single step along that way. So you initially get that appointment scheduled. We all know there's a little bit of slippage, unfortunately, but from that initial lead that gets scheduled to an appointment, you're going to have about 70 to 80% of those scheduled appointments go out the door. They're going to be issued. Your sales rep's going to go out and meet with that homeowner. Ultimately, the vast majority of those should result into a demonstration and ultimately leaving that consumer with an estimate. Best case scenario, you're going to walk out of there with a signed agreement. And I would say that happens on average around 20 to 30% from the demo to the sale. So those are pretty typical online leads generated and converting from the initial lead to an appointment to the demo and to the sale.
Absolutely. And I would say the biggest thing for a company to get the best at in that practice is converting that raw lead. So following the best practice, as you said, getting the lead quick, having the right callers, having the right scripting, doing that call correctly, to get it to a set appointment. That's the biggest thing that I think people have to do right, because I think once after the appointment gets set, everything's going to pretty much play out the way the rest of your company statistics do when it comes to, issue rate, demo rate, and sales rate. Sources do vary a little bit here and there on demo rate and everything, but it should fall nicely into the mix of the rest of your leads once you get good at setting that appointment. And it just is, I'm asking you about proper expectations, but creating that proper expectation with the consumer, when you're talking to them on the phone. And so that kind of brings us to the next segment here, Peter, on, hey, what do you see companies do right when they run, programs with you? And what do you also see companies maybe do wrong when they're running a program of buying online leads?
Sure, absolutely. And they kind of mirror each other a little bit for if you're doing it right or if you're doing it wrong. So, what companies do right that have a lot of success with Modernize and with online leads in general are a few things that we just went over, right? They're going to call quickly. They're going to call frequently and have a real process in place to make sure that they're hitting all of those steps along the way, including the voicemails or the emails, the text messaging, but ultimately getting that consumer on the phone and engaging with that consumer's needs. So the companies that engage with the consumer well are often going to have a higher conversion rate to a set appointment. Another thing I'd say for companies that are doing it right, understanding the online consumer. They often initiate a search, again, through Google, let's say, and they are searching for the home improvement professional in their market, in their geographic area. But it can be a little bit generic. They're not searching specifically for your company. So one thing I've always said is, to keep it somewhat generic, to go at it and say, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, this is Peter. I'm following up with the request that you had submitted online, showing interest in new replacement windows. Something along those lines. The consumer completely understands what you're talking about, and they know that they were just online putting in a request about that service or product. So, one note on that is to understand that the home improvement professional would understand that these online leads, they're technically non-branded in most cases, and they do perform differently than your own branded marketing. If you have a TV ad with your brand on it, that lead might convert a little bit higher. So understanding that expectation is very important, and then it just alleviates any stressors, we'll say, to where you're now able to really quickly jump right in there and have that conversation with the consumer.
Awesome. And then one of the other things that I'd like to bring up that we were talking about kind of in our pre-call is, about selling your company, not the consumer. In our little conversation we had on that about the goal is getting the appointment scheduled, not necessarily selling the job while you're on the phone. What are your thoughts on that point? Because I thought we had a really great conversation before we started recording on that.
Yeah, absolutely. That is very, very accurate to sell your company. You are there again to be the professional, to help that consumer feel comfortable and confident in their decision. I think of it as kind of a soft sell on the phone. You're letting them know who you are. You might be telling them about your company's history and how long you've been in business. You might want to, share a few, maybe not long-term testimonials, but you'll want to share a few highlights about your company. Again, that ultimate goal of that conversation is to schedule an appointment so that you can go and meet with that consumer face-to-face. So absolutely, I think of it as sell your company, not the consumer. Once you get out and meet with that homeowner, your sales rep knows what to do when they get in the door, and their ultimate goal is to walk away with a happy customer that's excited about their new home improvement project.
And that is actually a bigger conversation I've been having, with a lot of different clients recently. And it has been brought up on this podcast before, the idea that the person on that phone that takes that online lead that comes in, their job is not to sell the home improvement project. Now, if you're a really small company or even a one-man operation, it might be you that does go out to the home and sell them, but that's not the idea of the phone call. That's at the marketing level, and you're to get them excited about your company coming out to see them. And then when you go out to see them, is when you get them excited about, buying the product from you. And so very much with, being the expert, being flexible, I've always said as a marketer, we don't care if it sells. Now, obviously we really do, because that's the only way that the company makes any money at all. But what we care about is that we get an issued appointment out to a sales rep so that a sales rep has a chance to then do their job, which is to sell the job. And that's the key of the marketer. And I think there's that fine line when you're handling these leads that, just like you were saying about time frame, and maybe, being more flexible at scheduling a little further out if need be because they've reached out to you, is the same way with that. When you're on the phone with them, to not cross that line into going into selling the project and over qualifying that lead, and almost, as the old saying goes, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, that you may be disqualifying some leads that you very well could go see, demo, and possibly sell.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely right. It seems like a great concept to make sure you're qualifying the lead, but over qualifying can lose some sales. So sometimes you just need to kind of stick to the nuts and bolts and get that appointment going so that you can then go out and meet with them. The more people you meet, I'd say naturally, the more sales you're going to make.
And that brings us to, what do you see, as you said, the mirrored image, the companies do wrong when they're handling leads, from a service such as you provide?
Yeah. So, the worst case would be that you just don't call it, which shouldn't happen. You're paying for that lead, but
unfortunately it does, right?
It does. Unfortunately, it does. So, you have to make sure that your team's there with the dedication to make sure that when that lead comes in, they're calling it. So, if you're not calling it, or, again, if you're waiting to call, if you're waiting 30 minutes to call a lead, if you're waiting a couple hours, if it, might comes in 7 p.m., 8 p.m., and you wait until the next day. A lot with our service, our leads are delivered in real time. So we do have a general expectation that, as long as it's a reasonable time frame when that lead comes in, you should be calling it right away. So waiting to call is definitely a no-no. Make that first call quickly, right? So you can always make that second or third call later. Or just calling once. I've run into this scenario numerous times, speaking with somebody that's considering purchasing leads through us, and they'll say, well, I'm going to call this lead once, I'm going to leave them a voice message, and if they're interested, they're going to call me back. Unfortunately, that can hurt. That can hurt you a little bit because you gave very little effort to get that appointment, potentially. So I'd always encourage anyone that kind of thinks that way to, maybe rethink about that and understand that there is a different consumer behavior from an online lead, or just kind of that online consumer that you need to put forth a little more effort there, than just one call and one voicemail. Same goes if you make, a couple of calls, but you never send an email, you never send a text message, you're not taking advantage of all of the new technology and all of the different avenues that consumers communicate with today. It's really important that you're doing those things. And the last thing I'd say, and I don't really see this happen all that often, but you just don't want to be too aggressive on the phone. And whether that's being too aggressive, asking for the appointment within the first minute of that conversation, and it kind of goes back to that demeanor of the call rep. You want to make this consumer feel extremely comfortable because they're going to invite you out to their home. So if you're a little too aggressive, whether that's in the tone of your voice or just the approach that you take to scheduling that appointment, it can be a little off-putting to a consumer. So I'd always, keep it polite, keep it professional, and that those will help you, have better results.
And I agree with you wholeheartedly on all those points that you brought out there, Peter. And I want to talk about the last one you talked about, being too aggressive in handling those phone calls. Being with Tony Hody Training and Consulting, we always preach the serve, not sell, attitude and methodology. And when handling any leads, I think it's key that you really elicit the pain, find out the problems they have, ask layered questions, and then give them the value that you're going to give them by coming out to see them. Again, not the value you're going to give them in buying your product, but the value they get for, doing the next step, which is getting someone out to their home to help them design, up that project. And I think when someone layers questions, they act like they're the expert, and ask those right questions, find out what the problems are, and then offer them the solution, which is getting someone out there to take a look at their problems. And they do that right. They can be what we would say aggressive. They can go for the appointment, but if all they're ever doing is just going for the appointment and they don't do all those other things, it comes across pushy, to the consumer. And so there's that fine line in being aggressive that, hey, if you're following the right systems and you have the right scripting and you're asking the right questions, you can be aggressive and go out and get that appointment, and it doesn't come that way, across to the consumer. So.
Absolutely. Great point. Yep. Aggressive doesn't mean not trying hard and not being, forthcoming with what which your end goal is to get that appointment. But absolutely. Great points there as well.
And then that brings us to the last segment of the show, Peter, which is entitled Power's Powerful Point. And what powerful point do you have for the listeners today?
Yeah, so Kyle, I was thinking about this one, and when I'm speaking with a home improvement professional, a marketing personnel, someone that we're talking about a lead generation campaign, I think it's a two-part approach, and that is communication and data. The way I think about these very important aspects when working with leads is that you and I, the home improvement company and Modernize Home Services, we need to communicate, whether that's daily, weekly, monthly. We need to communicate to make sure that we understand what you're experiencing with these leads. Another great way to really understand what you're experiencing with these leads and what your results are, that's the data. That kind of goes back to the CRM approach with being able to manage the leads and being able to pull a report pretty quickly and share that data, with us. We have a great team of account managers, and they are very, very good at, doing a data analyst and really dissecting the data. So we send you 100 leads, you send us a report back showing us a true disposition on all 100 of those leads, or whatever that number may be. So communication and data, those two things combined are what really build that strong, long-lasting relationship between us and the home improvement companies that are using our service. We always want to provide a successful campaign, and anytime we get data, there's usually a way, to make it work. If you're struggling a little bit, we look at that data, we find those pivot points, if you will, those levers, and make some campaign optimizations and turn things around to get you in a position where you're having a lot more success. So that's it. Communication and data will go a long way when working with any home improvement or online lead generation company, and those have been very crucial for me in my career here as well.
And I would even go further to say, first of all, those are great, powerful points, specifically talking about, using you in online lead gen, but just in business in general. I mean, great communication is key. I worked with a employer at one time, and one of the biggest things that he taught me is that data is key. Knowing where you're at. And I've seen just from being around, with different clients and stuff, that the ones that really stay on top of it and communicate and know their data, no matter if it's buying leads from you guys or any source that they may use, the ones that get that communication right, with their staff, and then, with the company that they're buying from, as well as know the data behind it, are the ones that are winning the game for sure.
Yep.
And so I really appreciate you being on the show today. I think there's a lot of good nuggets in there for any company, whether they've been doing it for a long time or just looking at buying leads from a service such as yours that they can really, put into practice. Last thing before I let you go off the podcast today, Peter, is, hey, if someone is interested in exploring, Modernize Home Services, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah. Rather than saying how to get in touch with me personally, I'd say go to modernize.com. The QuinStreet acquisition of Modernize, we are now Modernize Home Services. We're one company, we're one brand, we're one team, and so modernize.com. That's our flagship site now, Modernize Home Services, and so you can go there. You can easily click on the I'm a contractor link, put in your information, and we'll make sure that someone is following up with you to speak a little bit more further, about your needs. And if you're interested in purchasing leads, we can definitely help.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And of course, the listener, you can always go to TonyHody.com and just shoot us a message, and I can get you in touch with them also. So again, Peter, I thank you so much for your time today. I look forward to catching up with you, down the road and possibly having you on a future episode. So thanks again.
You're very welcome. And thank you for having me, Kyle. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Lead Gen Leaders Podcast. For a free consultation on how Tony Hody Training and Consulting can assist with your home remodeling business, please visit TonyHody.com. That's TonyHoty.com. Thank you for listening.